Having played Holy since 2005, I know that the Templar tree is the tree that I will know the least about, and yet here I am putting together an ideal hero talent tree for Templar. May the light have mercy on my ignorant soul. Well, hopefully not that ignorant. I've looked at Icy Veins for some information about rotations, and I have the spell enhancement research I did. And I've seen enough in the forums to know that Retribution Paladins are chomping at the bit to get their hands on an ability that instantly closes gaps. Considering the capstone of my ideal Templar tree is Falling Sword, which is an instant gap closer that takes you straight to the target, among other things, I suspect very strongly that my tree will have a lot of its many, many mistakes forgiven. I hope that my mistakes are nevertheless pointed out so I can, fix them. I'd like to talk about some of the mistakes that I know I've made and some of the things I think I should change going from Iteration 1 to Iteration 2. For starters, Judgment of Justice in Retribution's tree makes the Burden of Guilt upgrade that I had for Exorcism redundant since Exorcism replaces Judgment for Templar. Now, you gotta have Exorcism in here somehow, seeing as how Exorcism is deeply entrenched in Paladin lore. Paladins entered the Warcraft franchise in Warcraft 2. Exorcism was one of their key spells for damaging the undead. It belongs in Paladins kits in one form or another. But anyways, I replaced Burden of Guilt with Improved Exorcism, which causes Exorcism to deal additional damage over 10 seconds where multiple applications can overlap. Now, I know that Exorcism was removed earlier in Dragonflight precisely because it applied a damage over time effect, and maintaining that damage over time effect caused rotation bloat. But this isn't a damage over time that's meant to be maintained. It's just added damage, implemented as a damage over time effect so that it's not as spiky. One of the reasons why I'm going from 2 mandatory upgraded active abilities per tree to 1 mandatory one and one choice between 2 other abilities is because of Condemn. My earliest proto-draft was pretty much just me trying to pull in as many Diablo abilities as possible willy-nilly, which in retrospect wasn't a wise goal to have in the first place. I need to do what works for World of Warcraft, not what worked in another genre. Condemn was meant to upgrade Shield of the Righteous for protection and Divine Storm for retribution, but I struggled to come up with exciting ways to further upgrade the Condemn ability after creating it. Being able to let go of an arbitrary requirement that I had in my first iteration, a requirement to have a secondary pick one talent buffing each upgrade ability, and instead adding yet another ability to have alongside Condemn in the same talent node was really appealing to me as a designer, so I decided to give players the option of merging Shield of the Righteous with either a single target retribution finisher or Divine Storm. That's right, if you're going into this starting from Retribution, you can add a little multi-target DPS to Final Verdict on top of buffing its main target damage a bit, and if you're going into this from Protection, you can massively up the single target damage of your Shield of the Righteous ability. Punish is the name of the single target upgrade, which is a little ironic when you consider that Punish is the Crusader Strike equivalent for Crusaders, but it was the most fitting name I could find. And it gets better. If you have a shield equipped, then Punish strikes with both your weapon and your shield. I mean, we've seen abilities that strike with both weapons for dual-wielding specs. It's only fair that somewhere in World of Warcraft there will be an ability that strikes with your shield and your weapon at the same time, and that sounds both Paladinish enough and like it belongs in a Retribution/Protection combined tree, so here it is, Punish. I should add that the Solar Shock talent that I came up with for Herald of the Sun gave me a new philosophy. When I merge 2 abilities together in one of these hero talent trees, I should look for perks for each spec that are in the other spec's tree. For example, Condemn automatically gives you the Tempest of the Lightbringer perk if you're Protection, sending out a projectile that deals additional damage, and if you're Retribution, it automatically gives you the Relentless Inquisitor perk that boosts your haste by 1% each time you cast Condemn, stacking up to 3 times. For Punish, Protection gets a small self-heal currency of Justicar's Vengeance, which is suboptimal for Retribution at the moment, but hey, it helps Protection, whereas Retribution gets a variation of the Righteous Protector perk that reduces the cooldown of Avenging Wrath each time you cast Punish. That way, Condemn can be the boring but practical stacking stat talent, while Punish can be the exciting cooldown enhancing talent. Each does more than the baseline Retribution abilities that they're replacing, too. And yes, you can equip a shield while wielding a two-handed weapon as Retribution, thanks to the Heavenly Strength talent that's intended to allow Retribution to off-tank and Protection to off-DPS. I've shifted its icon to the old Greater Blessing of Might icon. I think that's pretty appropriate, and since my new assumption is that all nodes are going to be filled in, I've made this a pick one of two talent choice node. I've also moved my Templar version of Awakening, a talent that causes Avenger's Shield or Blade of Justice to help you get a backdoor into getting some extra Avenging Wrath time, so I figure it's a decent alternate to complement the off-specking Heavenly Strength talent. These perks help to build up Templar as a just plain powerful hero tree, albeit one that has some ramp-up time, which I already established with my Seal of Vengeance Keystone passive. Speaking of, I've decided to call it a maximum of 3 stacks for Seal of Vengeance, and Fanaticism doesn't stack on top of Seal of Vengeance, it simply adds crit and parry to per stack for Seal of Vengeance. I've also removed Holy Wrath from the Templar tree. It was meant to add a small explosion of holy damage when you first cast Consecration, but Retribution's rotation is bloated enough. I should not be adding more abilities than I absolutely need to. That's why Exorcism buffs Judgment, which is already in the rotation, and the other node buffs either Divine Storm or Final Verdict, again, both of which are in the rotation already. That left about 3 gaps that I needed to fill in. One of them is going to be a choice node that contains Hammer of the Templar, which causes Hammer of Justice to knock the target back 30 yards. Combine that with Falling Sword, which I found a better icon for, and Templar has the ability to knock a single target backwards, leap to them, and then open up a can of holy flavored whoop-ass on that single target. Sure, it's on a cooldown and you can only do this with one target, but it's still a pretty awesome thing to be able to do. And it adds a great deal of fun and functionality to the Paladin class that wasn't there before. Though I do wonder if I should have made Hammer of the Templar a PvP talent instead. I've decided to pull some classics from the good old days to fill in the remaining gaps. A complement to the Hammer of the Templar talent is Pursuit of Justice. That increases your versatility and your movement speed. I figure versatility is a good thing to buff for a tree that can contribute either to DPS or to tanking. In the middle, I've got Seal of Command, though it's not the old multi-target damage added to your auto attack. Instead, it causes your holy power spending abilities to generate 1 holy power whenever they crit. If that was a bad move, well, I guess I'll just have to think of something else. Finally, I added a buff to some of the deeper holy damage cooldowns that Retribution and Protection have, since I haven't yet buffed those abilities. Eye of Tear, Wake of Ashes, Final Reckoning, and Execution Sentence deal 20% additional damage over 8 seconds, and apply a damage shield to you equal to 50% of the damage that they deal, and that damage over time I'm calling Censure. At first, only Eye of Tear was buffed for protection, but then I decided that wasn't enough. And the only other deep protection active ability was Moment of Glory, a cooldown that buffs Avenger's Shield and that generally provides absorb shields for a quarter of the damage you deal. I figured buffing Avenger's Shield when Moment of Glory was active was a good next step for this Censure talent, only to realize Moment of Glory already gives you absorb shields. Then I decided that increasing the amount of shielding that you get from Avenger's Shield isn't really that bad an idea, and I went forward with it. The idea now is that this 50% number overrides the 25% number that's already attached to Moment of Glory. Yes, each of these has been pulled from Paladin's history. In fact, almost the entire tree is pulled from some part of Paladin's history, and every exception except Hammer of the Templar is pulled from Crusaders and Diablo. But the final result is a big, strong, beefy, tanky Paladin, and personally I think that's what Templars should be. That said, I know I'm going to make mistakes with this. I've played Holy since 1005, not Retribution or Protection. Please do point out my mistakes, and please do point out how I can make Iteration 3 better than Iteration 2. For the sake of completeness, I'd like to have an addendum here about an idea I decided not to try, at least not in Iteration 2. I had thought about merging Blade of Justice and Avenger's Shield into a single ability that provided 2 holy power and leapt from target to target. I was considering calling that ability Holy Wrath. But in the end, I decided against it. Blade of Justice already has a talent that makes it multi-target in Retribution. But depending on what people tell me, I might be pulling that idea back in. We shall see. There are some talents that make Avenger's Shield do splash damage for each target that gets hit. If that's okay, then maybe it's also okay to combine Avenger's Shield and Blade of Justice into a single new ability, even with those existing talents in place.